Welcome, everyone, to the official 68th episode of Coffee and Philosophy here on the MSP Waves Radio, hashtag not a radio station. I'll be your Clayboy this evening, and it's possible there's like some Aussie bloke bumbling around, but I'm really not sure. Let me go open up the back door and take a look around.
Giddy up, winning blues, that kind of stuff. VBs, pack of galas, fair suck of the Sav, all that kind of stuff. What's kicking?
Man, I was thinking you weren't gonna make it. I figured you had to run to the servo and get a pack of weenies and a cuppa.
Yeah, well, I got back in time. I was just having a few issues with the whole, Discord being hinky as usual. So I was mucking around with a few settings and that kind of thing. So I was here, but not really here, but I was here.
Okay, so I just turned you up. Let's see if talk for a minute. Let's see if they can hear you better.
Turn it up, crank to 11, and blow another speaker.
Yeah, I mean you're peeking out a little bit, like close to where I am, so it should be fine.
I'll just make sure I don't yell too much.
Yeah, I mean, fuck it, dude. Fuck the police. You know, we do whatever on this show. No rules. No rules. There are no laws, no slaves, no masters. We're here to do the damn thing.
That's it. We do's what we do's. We be's who we be's, and that's that.
Yeah, if only we could ever remember what the actual thing is, then like we might get better at doing it. But fuck it.
Yeah, well, we just do that thing, like the guy from that time,
Yeah, and then we make weird noises and everybody claps. I mean, it's always a lovely time here. So what's been going on with you this week, dude?
Look, more of the same for me, just dealing with the same issue I discussed last week. My well, it's not really teeth, it's a gum situation. He's a little bit better, but I'm still dealing with it and, just causing myself more pain. But apart from that, not too much. Looking at crypto again, because, we all know crypto's been taking off a little bit, BTC taking a bit of a jump and then a bit of a dive. So looking at those kinds of things, but apart from that, not too much.
Yeah, I've heard, like one of those like old wives' tales. Well, whenever your baby is teething, you can like just pour a little whiskey on the little whiskey on the nipple or something. Uh, so like maybe that's what we need to do for you, Cope. Just shove a little whiskey on there, and like
Hmm.
maybe you'll be good to go.
Right, so smear my genitals with alcohol, and it'll fix my mouth. You reckon?
I mean, either that or you got to find somebody to volunteer and help you. Just go find somebody that'll like let you put some whiskey on their nipples and go to work.
Right. Well, look, I'm sipping on the awesome juice at the moment, so but we'll go from
Oops,
there.
I jumped into the audience. Look at that. Fucking chaos tonight, man. Like I don't know what's going on. You know what? LP, can you message Jacob and ask like what's going on with the moon or whatever right now? Because like I mean I feel like there's like some weird energy and yeah, man. Like I don't know. Like I'm just gonna like pump today. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm gonna blame it on the Copahol.
Well, yeah, look, things have been looking a bit more up of late. Could be just the season. Could be just feeling good about stuff because of the vibes, the frequency, and when moon.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, things have been feeling like they're looking up a bit over the last couple of weeks. It's really weird because I know I mentioned this at least a couple of times because I'm trying to make sure everybody's thoroughly prepared. But I'm gonna be starting a job in about 10 days, so like while next week we'll still be here at the regularly scheduled bat time on the same bat channel and all of that. After that, shit's gonna get a little weird, but I mean, I figured like I'll just try to like put out like an announcement ahead of time and like like let people have some kind of idea of when to expect us. Yeah, fuck it, I don't know. Hopefully it'll stay like around the same day and time, but yeah, I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, well, look, that's it. Things are changing, things are moving. You got to keep up with the times. We've got to adapt. That's our superpower, right? This is what keeps us on top of the food chain and that kind of thing. Our ability to adapt and make changes as needed, and not just in the way that we interact, with our surroundings and our environment, as much as catching food and that kind of thing, but also mentally as well when it comes to making the shift and making adjustments for what you need to do to survive in this crazy ass world that we live in. So that's what happens. I know that humans don't like change, but it is part of what we have to do. And sometimes the changes are good, sometimes the changes are bad, and sometimes we just grow from just the change itself. So if we don't see it as a bad thing, we just see it as just it's just something that's happening, and try and make the best out of it. Check out the silver lining on the cloud, and do what we can with what we've got. You never know. We might have some beautiful things come from this.
I hear you, dude, and you know what, man? Like maybe I need to grow me some of that stevia too. I saw you you went and planted like a couple of plants of stevia.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean I've tried salvia, but like I guess I've never smoked stevia. So I mean like maybe I can give that one a go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know El Turico was throughout the idea of talking about communication, and I mean like I guess if everybody's saying it's going to be like a Mercury retrograde, which I'll just go ahead and clear up since like I've never I guess like really gotten too heavily into this stuff. Personally, like I feel like if it resonates with you, whatever. But like in general, like I don't really get into the whole astrology thing. It's just I don't know, like it's never called to me. But do your thing. But like people seem to think that like Mercury retrograde causes problems with communication, and oddly enough, I'm somebody that was born under like a like whatever like my sign was. What do they call it? Like like I don't know if they say like slave to Mercury or like a messenger to Mercury or some shit. I
Are
don't
you
know.
talking about like rising signs? Is that what you're talking about? Because someone told me something about rising signs at one point, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Because there's the whole like um astrology thing where they're talking about like your star signs and that kind of thing. And like realistically, like I'm a Leo, right? That's where I'm at. But I don't have the traits of Leos. Like some of the heavy sorry, the heavy traits are kind of like wanting attention all the time, these kinds of things. And I'm kind of like not like that. I'm really shy. So like I was mentioning this to someone that was heavy into, and they're like, well, the explanation for that is that your rising sign is zero, and went into this whole spiel about like these multiple facets. It's not just like one thing. So is that what you're talking about? Like a rising sign?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, like I said, I don't really put like a whole lot of stock into it, but I mean, now that you said that, yeah, apparently I don't know, I'm a Virgo, right? And my moon was in Mercury, whatever that means. But yeah, I mean, I guess we could talk about communication a little bit, and
Hmm.
like I think we got into this like a little bit in the past about like words and like spoken language is actually masking the vibrations. But like one thing that I was kind of like thinking about whenever I was looking at the topic was like think about how your like ego talks to you, right? Like think about the voice in your head. How does it communicate with you, right? Like obviously, I would say like most of us can like like at least recognize that like we have the inner monologue, right? Like we talk to ourselves, whatever. But like I think like if we're really like listening and paying attention, like we communicate so much more than just like a verbal spoken communication. And I think this is one of the big reasons why like face to face in person communication is to me like so vital, especially like in things like like relationships, right? Like long distance relationships, it's obviously very difficult to communicate effectively whenever like most of your communication is either over the phone or through text messages, things like that. But like face to face personal communication, you can pick up on so much more, like the energy coming from the person, things like that. And it's one thing that like really stuck with me whenever I started like considering how much words are actually designed to mask our vibrations.
Yeah, for sure. Look, and here's the thing, like what you're saying there in regards to communication and live communication versus, communication through a phone or, even through Skype and that kind of thing as well. We can lose some of the details through a number of different ways. But essentially, what it comes down to is that the communication that we have with one another, like the words that we're saying, is only a certain amount. It's somewhere less than 10%. So we're talking like 90% plus is more than just the words that you're saying. So this goes into tone. It goes into even so like the micro expressions on the face, body language, all these different bits and pieces. They all come together so we can communicate in a particular way. And if we're missing some of these elements, through whether it's we're not physically in the same space and that kind of thing, we can miss things. We can, things can just get by us, and miscommunication happens. But on top of that, the thing that we have to keep in mind as well is that as human beings, we lie, right? As bad as that kind of like sounds, is that's what we do. We hide our shit, and we can talk about the societal norms and all that kind of stuff. We've done it in the past, right? But we're influenced by these things, like we hear things like the 3 date rule kind of thing, and the golden rule and the platinum rule, and all these rules that are around there about like what a society expects from us through particular communications. So even though we feel particular things, we're kind of like designed to go like, I feel this, but I can't say anything. I can't tell this person that, or I can't say that. That's not acceptable. On that level, this is external. But even on the internal level, when we're sitting here and communicating with ourselves, and we're having this backwards and forwards, that anxiety that you're feeling inside, that's a means of communication for yourself as well. So even during the communication that you're having with yourself, there's these signs, and you're trying to hide shit from yourself. You're trying to, put that concept of whatever you thought it is. Maybe you think your partner's cheating on you. Maybe you think you're going to get fired or something like that for something that you did at work. And your mind says, no, don't think about that. Let's hide that. Let's do this, right? And you're sitting there, even trying to like manipulate your own thoughts when you're talking to yourself, to hide these thoughts, feelings, and opinions from yourself. So when we start understanding that it's not just on an external level, but it's on an internal level, it takes a different, completely different shape. So communication as a basis, human beings, like, we just manipulate the fuck out of that shit, and we lie. So that's the first step of understanding like what's happening. The next is, how do we intervene? Because realistically, these kinds of deceptions, not only of others but ourselves, ultimately it ends up in us hurting ourselves and other people.
Yeah, no, and it's funny, right? Because like I feel like a lot of times I'll notice, I guess like the topic that or like the way that we've described it in the past is like like that brutal honesty when you're like just being too honest with people. But like I always find it funny because like whenever people think that someone's just being like like too blunt, too rude or whatever, I'm just like personally I find it kind of refreshing, right? Like even if I 100% disagree with the person, like I can appreciate somebody that feels like zero inclination to be fake about it, and it's funny because like I can look back at it, and it's one of the things that I had to like reach that point personally where like I was so I guess like I had such a long history of just like repressing myself and like what I can and can't say, what I should and shouldn't think, blah blah blah. And like whenever I finally got to the point that I was just like, look, like I'm done lying. I refuse to lie. Like fuck the consequences. Because I think one thing that people don't really like fully understand or like fully grasp like the implications of is whenever you're constantly lying, you're lying to yourself. Now, most people will like let their ego like play with them, be like, yeah, like the other person's such a fool, they're falling for it or whatever. But like, the fact that you think you need to lie about that stuff in the first place is like your ego already manipulating you, right? Like you already have given up your authenticity to deceive other people, and like the greatest deception of all is letting yourself believe that you have to do that. Now, like, usually people can like justify these things or like have some kind of like ulterior motive, like, well, if I want the paycheck, I gotta be fake, blah blah blah, whatever. And one thing that's kind of interesting, right? And like I felt like I was having trouble like whenever I started looking for a job again because like I refuse to be fake with these people. So like I went to a couple of interviews and like one of them they were like wanting me to get into management to like run some kind of like $1 million company crap whatever. You know what they do, they put you over a store and expect you to do all this shit. And like while I'm sitting there talking to him, she starts talking about like the money and all this stuff, and she's like, "Is the pay gonna be okay with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't really bother me." And she's like, "Why?" And I'm like, honestly, like money's just not my biggest motivator." And like I could just tell like that set off like red flags with her. She was like, like she started like jotting down notes, and I'm just like, whatever. So of course I never heard back from them. But whenever I went in for this last one, like I feel like it's actually something that like I can do to like add value to the world and help people. And like I mean, I had no problems like making it clear that like that's the kind of stuff that motivates me. Like that's the kind of thing that makes me want to like get out of bed in the morning and actually go do this bullshit. Because like just straight up selling yourself for money sucks, especially whenever you have to be inauthentic and like just hide who you are or like what your own personal beliefs. It's like whenever you're not being congruent with yourself, it sucks. Like the work is just not fucking worth it. It's miserable. So like, whenever I went to this last interview, I mean, I was just point blank honest with this chick. Like anything she asked, like as usual, I'm just dead on. Like I'm not trying to fake it and sell myself as anything I'm not. And like lo and behold, they call me back like the next day and hire me, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing that's interesting to me is like when you mentioned there that you sort of like expressed yourself openly and honestly, and it seemed to be like a set of flags that went off, and things being written down and that kind of thing, like a flurry of of action based on something that you said, and it kind of like makes me think of the whole perspective that if there's someone that steps out of that norm, it's very much seen as an issue, and what I tend to call it, it's a self-correcting system that we live in, because what's happened is over the time we've been, whether you want to call it indoctrination camps, manipulation, mind control, whatever. We have this perspective that if something is not air quotes normal, it must be sort of like there's something wrong here, something needs to change here, and through the process of whether it's ridicule, whether it's comparison, there's a number of different tools we can utilize to get these people right to do what we want them to do, and that is to come back to conform. We see this often, like if you're thinking about starting your own business and that kind of thing. Your friends and your family are like, oh, that X amount of businesses fail, within the first couple, and then on top of that, then another few years, and they give you all these reasons, these rules and regulations, and they say, stay within the lines, stay safe, don't go outside the boundaries. And it's like, when we start thinking for ourselves, it is something that scares people. It's something that we shouldn't do. It's a taboo. We shouldn't do that. How dare you? And we're very quickly pulled back into line. And I do think that the shift moving forward for humanity, for society, however you want to put it, is based on leaving these kinds of structures behind because they've been designed by whether it's political systems, governments, and that kind of thing, to basically just keep us in that mind, numbing state where it's like, well, I have all these hopes, dreams, and aspirations, but I don't really want to try and chase them because I need to be safe. I need to make sure there's money in the bank. I need to make sure there's money coming in, food on the table, and we basically spend our lives doing something that makes us miserable because we think that it's safe, as opposed to chasing the things that we want to do and feeling better about what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, just touching on some of the chat. I think there's definitely like different ways to approach radical honesty, right? Like,
Hmm.
I would say like the first and foremost thing to understand is just because you have a thought doesn't quantify repeating it. like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, personally, like, I don't think I would ever just walk up to someone and be like, God, you look like shit today. Like, go do something about it. But, like, also, that's generally not, like, something that's really, like, on my mind when I'm looking at someone. Like, I mean, I guess, like, I get it. Some people are, like, that heavily focused on, like, physical appearances and things like that. But, yeah, I mean, like don't I don't want to like create confusion here. Like whenever I say just being like completely like radical honesty, blunt with it, I don't mean you have to like say every thought that comes into your mind. like I don't like agree with like basically
PC.
right, like how I guess like growing up, like our parents would tell us, like sometimes you have to tell a white lie and like all this kind of shit. I'm like, I guess like I'm at that point where I'm just like, if you don't have something nice to say, you just don't have to say anything or whatever. But like I mean, like, I guess if somebody like point blank asked, like, does this thing that I'm wearing look fine or whatever, and I thought no, I'd probably be like, nah, you might want to go change. And I mean, like, if that really hurts somebody's feelings, then I doubt they'll ask me for my opinion again. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't respond with like, no, that looks like, you look like shit. Like that's just, I don't feel like that's very constructive. but yeah, I mean, like I get it. Like in our culture, there's lots of people that respond like that. Um, is that brutal honesty or radical honesty or whatever? Maybe, but I don't think it's effective communication skills by any means.
Yeah. Well, look, and this is the thing that happens when we start talking about radical honesty. There's people that have seen the dark side, if you will, of radical honesty, and they see it as people just being assholes. And I wrote something about this like ages ago when we discussed it. The whole Nana's cookies thing, right? That scenario where essentially like from when you were a kid, you were growing up. Yeah, and Nana used to make you cookies and that kind of thing, and you used to love them, right? So let's say she was making you raisin cookies, and you used to love them growing up, but at some point, she just keeps making every time she sees you, she making these cookies, and you're older now, your taste change, that kind of thing. And if we're talking about the impression that people may have of radical honesty, they think that they can turn around and say, "Grandma, your cookies are shit. I hate your cookies. How dare you make and literally just tear shreds off your grandma for making you cookies, right? Cookies that she used to make for you when you were a kid, but you didn't have the stones to say, well, look, I don't like these kind of cookies anymore. But if we use utilizing radical honesty properly in the way it should be utilized, what you do is say, look, Nan, like I love that you're making these cookies for me and all that kind of thing, and I love that you make cookies for me every time I come here, right? But my tastes have changed, yeah, and you have this open conversation. So instead of like pretending that you like these cookies and munching these things, going, oh god, they're great, and you take them home and you throw them in the bin, right? She's wasting her time making you these cookies, and you're wasting like yourself by lying and being like, oh yeah, they're fine, and then you're throwing away the cookies. So being radically honest, what you do is go, okay, well, look, and explain the situation and say, okay, well, look, this is how it is. I don't really like these cookies anymore. My tastes have changed. I like chocolate chips. I like, some M&Ms in my cookies. I want, snickerdoodles or something like, just tell them what you want. Right. And yeah, she might go like, oh, she may feel a little bit upset that she's been doing this for you for so long and you've been kind of like lying about it. Right. But that's on you. You did that. Right. But if you're capable of having this conversation, the outcome of this could be that suddenly she starts shifting away and she goes, okay, well, what do you like? And you go, snickerdoodles, right? Okay, fantastic. So she starts making snickerdoodles. When you get tired of them, you tell her, right? And she makes you choc chips, double choc chips. Like, this is what I'm saying. The outcome is beneficial for everybody involved. But like I said, if we dial that back to the first example that I gave you, where you're just tearing shreds of people, well, yeah, look, like Izzy's saying, you're being a fucking asshole. That's not the way to do it. But this is what I mean. Like when people read through radical honesty and how it works and that kind of thing, they sort of like step away from the definition, they step away from the appropriate use, and they make it suit their needs because they feel bad about things, because they feel crap about things. They think that they can utilize this tool as a means of just tearing shreds off people and pissing people off. Well, that's not what radical honesty is about. Radical honesty is just expressing yourself openly and honestly. So if someone turns around and says, look, I'm having a housewarming party, and and you just don't want to go, right? Why are you going to lie and make yourself go, or make up a lie and just turn around and say, look, I'm not really interested in going, thanks for inviting me, maybe next time, instead of going through all the hoo-ha of making up excuses and pretending that you're sick and then you can't go out yourself on the weekend because you said that you're going to, you're sick and you can't go out. They're checking your Facebook. All of these bits and pieces all come together into the point of what we're getting at here is you're lying to yourself, you're lying to other people, and the outcome is what weighs on you. This is what makes you feel better. This is why you feel like crap. This is why you feel upset. And being able to tackle that in this way, like utilizing radical honesty appropriately, means that some people may get hurt off the get-go because you've been helping them and yourself live a life for a while, so that may be a bit of a shock in itself. But at the end of the day, when you start getting more towards a congruent self, you start getting the things that you want, and people start understanding who you are as a human being and what you actually want and require from the interaction of whether it's a friendship, family member, whatever it is. And it actually starts going the way that it should be, right? Instead of all of these lies and manipulations getting in the way.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that. Like, I think whenever we start, it's like a slippery slope, right? Like, it's very easy to snowball from like just compromising on like little things to, like full on like. What I think we have to realize is that like whenever we misrepresent ourselves to other people, it's like you have to remember that and be consistent with it, right? But like whenever you're being consistently not something that's authentic to yourself, like you're getting used to it, right? Like you're becoming more and more comfortable with it. And it's like the more often you do this and the more you let it build up, the less and less authentically you that you are. And it can, like it can definitely build up and snowball. And I think that's the big takeaway is like, I feel like it's almost like a death by 1,000 cuts or whatever, right? Like it's not like I just like suddenly woke up one day and I was gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna be a completely fake person. But no, like over the course of like growing up and going to school, entering the workforce, like I had got so used to basically misrepresenting myself for what I thought everyone else wanted, that like I finally had to have like that faceplant moment of like, look, like I'm just I don't remember who I am anymore, right? Like I end up basically like living this facade that I think everybody wants to see or whatever, right? But then like whenever you get to that point where you're just like, fuck it, like I don't really care, like I might as well just be who I am, and if it causes problems, then like in general, basically people will like either go out of my life, or like you gotta kind of like trust the law of attraction a little bit in that. But I also think effective communication and like having compassion for other people is a big part of it, because if you just go on like complete brutal honesty and like don't care about other people at all, then it's very easy to isolate yourself. And like what Azario was saying, like when you walk up and you're just like, damn, you look like shit today. Well, like if that's how you greet people, don't be surprised when nobody wants to fucking talk to you, But
Yeah.
also like if you just greet people like, hey, how's it going? And then like they happen to ask like, like how does this look or whatever, and you can be like, oh, personally, I mean, I think like I would have chose something else, something like that. I mean, like you don't have to straight up just like brutally like try to like destroy the other person by like making them feel bad, but
Hmm.
it's one of those things I think we all gotta like kind of figure out and learn. But yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and broach this topic we got going on in the chat. Yeah, so like we included a new room, and like personally, I I don't really care either way. But like at the same time, I feel like we have another room for like the complete opposite type of people. And like in general, what I think is we're just trying to be like inclusive as a community. And if some people want a certain type of room, like we have a room for recovery and addiction, we have a room for tinfoil hat people. We and hey, I'm joking, but like basically, I'm one of those for the most part anyway. The truth room. Let's see, we got sustainable living. I think the thing is like some people are just over, for whatever reason that they're more sensitive or like more aware to some of the jokes and things like that we take on, and if they're not comfortable with them, well, there's a room for not being crude. I mean, apparently even me, like some of my jokes offend some people sometimes, and I get it. It's not like my intent, but it's not like I'm saying things to do harm, but that's not always how other people see them. So trying to be like respectful of that other perspective, it just is what it is. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, look, we're all different people, all have different things that we're into and that kind of thing. I think the better part of these kinds of interactions is to be able to put these things aside and try and gain um, some greater perspectives and like all that kind of thing. But that means putting these kinds of biases and things aside. Like, understand that you're entitled to them, you can have them, that kind of thing. But if you want to communicate with other people, you're going to have to take on some of these things and go, okay, well, there's going to be people that are saying things that I don't believe in, things that may be offensive and that kind of thing, and take it with a grain of salt. Because if you're not willing to sort of like do that in means of interaction, then you're going to get offended at pretty much anything and everything. There's going to be emotional content, there's going to be outbursts and that kind of thing, and there's not going to be any real progress. And again, there's nothing wrong if you don't want to do that as well. That's fine. But just be aware this is the sacrifices that you need to make when you go out into the world and you interact with people. By the same token, we can say the same thing. When you're going to a job, and they have like uniforms, they have particular ways you conduct yourself and that kind of thing. You make these sacrifices so you can interact in that particular way, and you get paid for it, right? And it's the same thing. So if unless you're willing to put that aside, well, then maybe just don't go into these rooms. You know what I mean? Like, just stay away from it.
Yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, like, I get it, right? Like, if whenever we see something that doesn't really, like make a lot of sense or resonate with us, it's easy to be kind of like, whatever. But at the same time, like, if it doesn't really affect me, then it just doesn't really matter, you know? I feel
Yeah.
like, we try to let everybody do their own thing, and, this just happens to be one example. Some people want a certain thing that the vast majority of the server doesn't, but as long as they're willing to go in there and use it, like that room's actually been around for probably like, I'm not gonna say since like the start of the server, but it got added pretty early on, and I mean, like, I get it. Some people just aren't into the having like 20, 30 people in a chat room all like going at it. They don't like to keep up with all the inside jokes. And like I can actually get that part of it. Like whenever you walk up to like a crowd of people and they've like known each other forever and they all have like their own like sets of inside jokes and things. It kind of like makes you feel like you're on the outside of the conversation a lot. So yeah, I mean, I get it. Social anxiety is a real thing. I think it's something that I think we should all be mindful of and try to like learn how to work through. But also, how people do that and like when and how they learn to do it is something a lot of people all take at their own pace.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And these things can also be utilized as means for your own behavior as well. Like we were saying before with the radical honesty. Just because people have particular traits, whether it's mental illnesses and that kind of thing as well. Say for instance, let's just say someone has schizophrenia. We can understand and accept that, but there's a certain point where you have to draw a line and say, hey, okay, like I understand that this is a situation here, right? But this is beyond my line of comfortability here, and I'm not standing for this kind of behavior any further. Um, Now, it can very easily turn around into a point of like people utilizing their conditions as a crutch, if you will, for their behavior, even though they understand their behavior is beyond what is reasonably um, sort of like expected in a social interaction, but they can easily turn around and lean on whatever condition that they have to make excuses for that behavior. And this is what I mean. Like there's a fine line, right, between being accepting of it and then tolerating to a certain degree, and then just letting people walk all over you. So and that's it, up to each person as an individual, and we have to understand that, and we have to be accepting of these traits and be able to draw our own lines and go, okay, well, this is enough for me. I'm disengaging. It's not worth interacting any further, because it's turning to crap. Unless, of course, like you get some kind of joy out of it. It sparks joy being in these situations, which I'm speaking to the trolls out there, that like having these kinds of interactions for the sake of having the interactions. They get a bit of a thrill out of it, and at the same time, we need to recognize that as well, right? And just interact at the level that you're comfortable with. Once it gets beyond that, disengage. Like there's no point continuing.
I think at this point, I'm gonna have to officially call you the Murray Kondo of Pow Cope because you've been sparking a lot of joys lately. You know what I'm saying?
How the hell have I been doing that?
I mean, you like I'm noticing you liking that phrase a bit there. Yeah, not like man. I remember whenever like I first saw one of her things, I was just like I so like resonate with the message and like like I agree, right? Like I feel like I'm pretty damn minimalist, and like it's odd because like one I didn't choose to be this way, and I didn't like intentionally get there, but for whatever reason and why I got there, like it really works for me. I like not having to. It's weird, like all this stuff, like I like all the stuff that people on, like I get it. Like if you like your stuff or whatever, then keep it. But like to me, it felt like I had so much shit just like stacked up and like set around places just so I could say I had it, right? Like I think like on some level, like I just identified with all the crap I had in my house, and it's like man, it's weird. Like it started kind of like making me think of like how much of this stuff do we do just so like we can have something to like talk with other people about or like have some kind of like reason to feel like we're part of something, and then like
Mhm.
the less like I can't even tell you the last time like I went out and like bought something just to like unless it's like something I need or like use like on a regular basis, like I would say my computer is probably like my only real quote unquote physical possession. I do have a vehicle, but like I guess other than using it to like go to the job or like go places, I don't really think about that all that much. But yeah, I mean, like I used to have like all these bookshelves full of books that I didn't read all the time. I mean, like in general, once you read a book, most people don't read them again. But it is what it is. I had like stacks and stacks of movies and like all of this shit, but like all it does is it just takes up space. And then like if you ever
Mhm.
like go to move, you have to like think about like what am I gonna do with all this shit? It's just like
Mhm.
I have so much stuff, and it's not like I use it, but like I don't want to get rid of it either because it all has like some kind of value to me, right? And then it's funny because like after like losing all of that stuff, I realized like it didn't really matter to me at all. Like why was I clinging on to all this shit?
Yeah. Exactly. Look, and this is something that I've had a few conversations with multiple people about when it comes to books in particular. Right, is one of those things. And because I got a friend who's like pretty heavy into books, and I said to him, look, you know that you can download all these books. I've got like, cause I'm into some books as well, do some reading myself. And I said I had like a bunch of books, psychedelic books and that kind of thing. Um, and I was like, well, the thing is, with all the digital stuff, I just want to download it all, and then I can get rid of these books. Like, I can sell them off, I can do other stuff. But like, I don't have this huge space that is taken up by a whole bunch of things that I can't utilize them all at the same time anyway, and that kind of thing. And I have them all on a little hard drive that fits in my pocket. I've got backups if I need it, so you can have another little hard drive that sits somewhere else that you can back all these things up on. And I've got like thousands and thousands and thousands of like the psychedelic books in particular, but like various other books. And I don't have to take up that space anymore. And this person turns around and says, very similar to what you're saying there. It's like, yeah, but the thing is, like, I have an attachment to this because at this time, blah 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 blah, and this was the book I was reading when I did this. Whether it's a psychedelic experience or something else. They have like these emotional attachments, and other people are saying like, well, there's no, there's no feeling that you can have the same as like when you turn a page and the smell of the book and that kind of thing. I'm like, okay, well, keep one, right? So you can have the smell and the sensation of turning the page, and have the rest digital. So you have a book for the pure sensation of turning a page, smelling it, and holding it while you're actually reading a digital, book, whether it's on the computer or it's on a tablet or something like that. It makes sense, right? But this is one of the things, like, we have difficulties in letting go of these kinds of material things because we have these kinds of attachments to them. And this is, I think, when it comes to books and these kinds of things, it's something that's useful. That's fine. But where it starts getting like a little bit ridiculous is when it starts getting into like artworks and things like that. Which, don't get me wrong, like, I appreciate art and that kind of thing as well. But the means by which the art is used. Like, I had a friend again who's like, see this piece here, and it's kind of like a little dude riding a horse or some crap like that. He goes, that's worth 60 grand, And I'm like, yeah, but like, it's covered in dust and all that kind of crap. And I'm like, yeah, but you clearly don't really care about it. And he's like, yeah, but it's worth 60 grand. And I'm like, so you're holding on to this thing because of the monetary value and that kind of thing. And maybe it will go up in price, maybe it will go down in price. But he doesn't actually appreciate it. He's not enjoying it. It's not his thing. He doesn't like it. There's no attachment to him besides the point of that it's worth X amount of money. Well, why don't you trade it in and just hold the $60,000, put 60 grand on the table? See that paper there? That's $60,000. Great. That's just as good as you telling me that little horse sitting on the table with a dude riding it is worth 60 grand, right? But this is what I mean, like, being able to detach from these things and doing what makes sense, minimizing sort of like your impact, the space that you take up, because you're paying for it. You pay for the space that you utilize. And if you're not using the things in your space, then it's just a waste, right?
Yeah, and like I can totally get it because like I used to really go like out of my way to like find and collect first edition books, things like that, and I mean I totally get it, right? Like the mindset, like I want to have this like special thing, right? Like collector's edition games or like movies, things like that. But I think basically the society we live in, like they've gotten so good at capitalizing on that mindset, right? And it's all about like basically just getting people to shell out more money for the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
man, I'm gonna pay $20 extra for this movie because it's got some extra scenes or like the director commentary. I mean, like, dude, if that's your thing, do it, right? But like, I'm at this point now where I'm just like, if I want to watch the movie, I'll go watch the movie, whether I gotta like rent it or whatever, or go to the theater. But like, as far as just like having it to sit on a fucking shelf as like some kind of status symbol, like
Yeah.
I'm just like I'm so done with that at this point, right? It very much got to that point where, and it's something that like I remember hearing like plenty of times in my life, but like it never really stuck with me. Like the things that you own you. But like once it really like set with me, and like I was able to fully grasp this concept of like all these things, right? It's just like they build up, and like you have to you have to basically like keep up with them and like it's like more and more shit just like constantly in your awareness. Like I don't know, man. It's weird, but like I said, my mindset is just gotten so far away from that at this point that it doesn't stick with me anymore.
And yeah, and this is what winds back to that, does it spark joy kind of thing that we were discussing a little bit earlier, and something that I keep sort of like leaning on, not so much because of the spark joy thing itself. It's just kind of like a medium to sort of like have a bit of fun with it. But this is realistically how we should be looking at these things. If you're holding on to these things and they don't actually genuinely bring you any kind of happiness and joy for actually interacting with this thing, you're just sitting on the shelf and you're just like, well, yeah, I've got that there and it's worth X amount of money and those kinds of things. You're not really enjoying this thing, so why do you have it? Like, why don't you spend your time and your efforts doing things and interacting with things that you enjoy and that you love, even if they're to other people they're air quotes worthless, right? Uh, why are you not doing those things? Because the happiness that you feel, the the way that you spend your life essentially means more than the monetary value based on whatever these material possessions are, because at the end of the day you don't get to take them with you into the next life. I mean, some people have been buried with their cars and that kind of thing. I understand that, right? You can try as hard as you can to take them with you wherever the hell you go after this life, but chances are you're leaving them here, buddy, because I'm pretty sure if I dig up that grave you're going to find a car. But again, going back to the society and that kind of thing, we're not designed like that. We're told to sort of like collect everything, hoard everything, and everyone's out to get your stuff and this kind of thing. So shifting that mentality is very difficult, considering it's something we've been experiencing since birth to date. Right? So trying to shake these kinds of mental situations is quite difficult, and I can understand that as well. But we've got to do the best that we can to sort of like shift our mindset, or else, like you said, exactly. The thing is that these items own us; we don't own them.
Yeah, and I mean it's weird because like I can totally see it from both ways. I mean, just like like you're a car guy, right? So like, if there's like this vintage car that's like special to you and everything, and like you're gonna drive it around, and like you want that specific kind, like even if it's like overly, like expensive compared to just getting a regular car to drive around, I mean, you're gonna get the thing that you want, right? And like
Yeah.
I get that. But it's the like the people that just collect like I want 20 cars to sit in my like my driveway or my garage or whatever just to have them. Like that's like the mentality that like I guess doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you're gonna like use them, like maybe if you want to drive a different car every day of the week or something. And I mean, like I get the like accumulating things as like an investment, but yeah, I mean, like if I guess that's something else to take into consideration because I really never cared all that much about money. Like, I mean, I've gotten to a point now where like I can appreciate it as a tool and like what it can like do for me in that sense. But like as far as just like having things, like a painting to hang on a wall for no other point that it's worth a lot of money, like that just doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather put up like a
Mhm.
freaking like a Starry Night poster, like costing
Yeah.
like $2-3. But I mean, like that's appreciating the aesthetic more than the value. And I mean, I don't think we should tell other people what they can and can't, value or want in their life. I just, as far as I'm concerned, like me personally, it doesn't resonate with me. But yeah, let's see. Anything going on in the audience? You guys got any other topics? We're gonna do like a Marie Kondo special.
We open for any kind of suggestions. We take deep dives. We do as we please.
And just touching on this too, like that holding on to things that like no longer serve you, it goes much more beyond materialism, right? Like we
Oh
can
yeah.
it can affect your relationships, your jobs, like your commitments, here's a prime example. Like one thing like my mom does is she goes and she teaches like the CCD thing at the church, right? But like every time she does it, like she's miserable about it, right? Like she'll talk about like how You know, like they make her go up there for like all these like random weird meetings, like all these things. Like you can tell like she, for whatever reason, she likes doing it for, you know, like I guess she thinks like, you know, this makes me a good person, or you like whatever she gets from it. But like the actual doing it part, you can just tell like she hates it. And like it's weird to me because like this is one of those things that I would have zero fucking qualms of just being like it's not worth my time, right? You know, like there's plenty of other shit that I could do that could make me feel like I'm doing good in the world without you know, like sacrificing on my autonomy and doing all the other shit that I don't want.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And and this is the thing. Like when we start shifting from material possessions to people, often people look at that and go, "Oh, I can't do that. That's a person." Yeah, well, that's a person, you know, or people that you're interacting with. But again, going back to that, they're not sparking joy. You're not happy doing that. You're not happy interacting with these people. You're not happy going to these places. You're not happy for whatever reason, whether they make you do stuff that you don't want to do. Yeah, maybe that they treat you a little bit poorly, or like for whatever reason. It doesn't matter what the reason is. But you're interacting with this thing, and you're choosing to go back time and time and time again. For what? For misery. And something that I've asked like a few people recently, it seems to be coming up in conversation, is why do you continue to seek things that bring you misery, right? And when you really ask them that question, it can take people back. But once they actually like settle on it, they're like, yeah, I really don't know why I'm doing that. Like why I'm staying in this relationship, why I'm still talking to that family member, why I'm staying at this job, why I'm doing these things. And I'm like, dude, like you really think about it. Is this what you want to spend your life doing? Right? Is this what you want to be doing when Jesus comes back? Right? Yeah, being miserable. So if you don't like it, change it. We have the capability to do these things, but we often forget that we have this kind of power to make decisions, to make choices, to step away from these things that we don't like. Fair enough, society is going to tell you, like, oh, you shouldn't do that. And like we said before, society has a self-correcting system in place. But if we can like override that and stick that to the side and go, yeah, okay, I don't care what anyone else thinks, because that's the main thing we should take away from this. Don't care what anyone else thinks. What do you want to do? And start finding a way to head towards it. You know, whether it's building cars, playing out in the garden, like whatever it is that you want to do that you actually feel like doing. Leave the crap behind that you don't want to do and start doing things that you really want to do.
Yep, I, I definitely agree. And it's just weird, right? And you know, like if we're getting into the why of it, you know, like on so many levels, there's the ego, the super ego, and the id. You know, touching on the psychology aspect of things. But
Mhm.
you know, like so much of this stuff comes from societal expectations or like family expectations, and you know, it's weird. Like a lot of us feel like we can't break away from like all of those expectations that we have, right? But it's also kind of weird too because like I don't feel like even like as much as like I can tell you like my parents still like put like all kinds of expectations on me. I don't think they're doing it with like the intention to cause harm, right? But
Mhm.
like if it's not congruent with the self, it is causing harm. And like if we're not in a place where we can you know, like consciously choose to disregard other people's expectations and, you know, like have our own, then it's very easy to like get caught up and feel like there's no right way to move and, you know, like feeling like everything we do is wrong somehow, right? Yeah, I mean it's rough. Like I get it. Like people struggle with this. I struggled with it for a long time. So like whenever I talk about things like radical honesty and like why I had to embrace it, it's like literally it's because like it got so bad that like I didn't remember who the fuck I was anymore. You know, and I mean, does any of us ever really know who we are like in that sense? I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we're all trying to figure out at all times personally, but you can definitely tell when you're not being yourself. I can tell you that much. If you can really like take the time to like look over at your life and like you know ask yourself the hard questions and face them, not being congruent with yourself is it's just not a good feeling. It's miserable and it's ultimately pointless as far as I can tell.
hmm And I just wanted to go back to what you were saying there in regards to these individuals that you're interacting with, and the impact or the effect that they have on you as an individual, right? And you were saying like it's not that they mean to do these things, and that's the thing. Like from where they're coming from, they're trying to help you, right? So don't think that they're like they're the devil, right? They're bad people, right? It's just like no, they're just not in line with what it is that you're doing. They're just different. It doesn't mean that they're bad. So the example that I like to give in regards to this is, say you got like a child is born to a family of doctors, and the forefathers and forefathers before them and forefathers before them, were doctors. So of course, as this child grows up, they're gonna have the influences that you should be a doctor, 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 doctor. And then when you go to medical school, when you do it, and often what you find is these people tend to sort of gravitate towards these kinds of things, right? Because the parents before and forefathers beforehand had been successful and gone through, and they've made money, and they've been able to look after themselves and put food on the table and these kinds of things. But what you do tend to see is that these people, as much as they do it and they can be good at it because they've got like all the right tools, they've got mentors to help them along their way and everything. They're doing really well in their area of expertise, but they didn't want to do it. You talk to some of these people and they're like, yeah, I really wanted to be like an artist or a musician, or I wanted to, like they've got all these hopes and dreams that they wanted to do, but due to the fact that they were just put in this situation, where they were born and that kind of thing, that they were influenced heavily by their peers, in the parents, and that kind of thing, who kind of like push this individual to move towards this particular area. And again, they're not doing it because they want to make this person miserable. They're doing it because it's what they think is best for them, and they're trying to influence them in that way. So when we take that understanding, you can't really see them as being evil human beings and terrible people and that kind of thing. They're just people, and they're trying to, help you get through whatever it is that you want to do in life. But the only person that really knows what you want is you. And considering, like, way at the start of this conversation, we're talking about how we lie to ourselves, we lie to other people, and those kinds of things. Nobody, even you, don't really know what you want sometimes, unless you really sit down and have a good conversation with yourself about it. So instead of looking at it like they're bad people or that kind of thing. Just look at they're different people. They're just they don't align with what it is that you want to do. Once you find what it is that you want to do and you start gravitating towards it, you'll start attracting people that are on the same kind of path, and that's when you sort of like start having that momentum, the same kind of momentum that you have when you're surrounded by doctors that are helping you become a doctor, even though you don't want to become a doctor. When you find what it is that you do want to do and you start gravitating towards that, you have people that are on the same path, and then they start helping you gravitate towards that path, right? And instead of moving towards something that you're not really too happy at, but you're happy with doing, like being a doctor, but you're pretty good at because you've got all the right influences. By the same token, if you're gravitating towards something that you want to do, you'll be surrounded by those kinds of people, and you'll be starting to gravitate towards something that you do want to do, and you'll be getting really good at that. You feel me?
Yeah, and going back to the people don't necessarily like mean to cause harm when they like put their expectations and perspectives and try to like project these things onto you. I think one thing to consider, especially like when we're talking about our parents and stuff like that, right, is we got to realize they grew up in a very different world than we do. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very much the same, but their economy was definitely like feeling inflation from you know post post getting off the gold standard. But getting to where we are now, like to me, it's really hard to look at the last 100 years economically and not see that we're experiencing, like, maybe it's not the technical definition of hyperinflation, but like well, whenever my parents could like buy like brand new vehicles with warranties and everything for under $10,000, they could go buy houses for like 30, $40,000. And then like looking at whenever we get out of college or like we get out of high school and we have to like try to go do like the whole starting your life thing, and call it like millennial whining or whatever if you want to, but like economically, we did not have the same chances and like the same way of doing things that they did. So like I can totally get that like they had that mindset, like go out, get the job, make something of yourself and all of this. But like the world that like I grew up in, like while I definitely was smart enough to do well, I went to college, I graduated, I did all the things that I was supposed to do. Like the thing is, what they were telling me I had to do all of this stuff for didn't exist on the other end of the tunnel. Like whenever I came out, and like even if I like overlook all the things that like really struck me politically, like feeling like basically like the government lies to us all the fucking time. Like if we can get past that and just look at things from like a sheer economic standpoint, and I think it's very difficult for like the generation that I'm a part of, or like even future generations coming after me, to like have any kind of feeling that like you can just do the check the boxes, like go to school, get a job, and your life's gonna be fine. Because like that's very much not the situation we find ourselves in now. I mean, fuck, like my healthcare insurance is like more than like a house note plus car notes for them used to be. The jobs aren't paying that much better. Like shit, I think my first job was making less than what my dad made. It's kind of mind blowing, right? Because the minimum wage went up, but the quality of life definitely didn't go with it. And the only real thing I can say to that extent is the inflation is just so insane. I don't think they can like fully comprehend. Like while they're telling us to do these things, I think they very much think it's going to turn out the same way it did for them. But being here and experiencing it firsthand, like that's not what it felt like.
Yeah, and look, and that's it. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Is what it comes down to is that perspective, because you're talking about people who have been there a long time ago and don't understand what it's like now, but they're still sort of like telling you, well, look, this is the formula. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. And if you did this, and they kind of like blame it on you for not being, because this is essentially what I tend to feel, at least anyway, from the people that I interact with, is that they feel like they're doing everything that they can to appease, the social norms, societal norms. Parents telling you this is what you need to do, government telling you this is what you need to do. We're doing the best that we can to hit these markers, but like the results are just not coming, right? It's like you're telling me, like, if I do this, this, and this, then I'll end up with this, and I'm doing those things, and I get there and I don't have that thing that you told me I was going to have. Like, what the fuck? And they turn around and go, like, well, it's your fault. You obviously weren't trying hard enough, and if you did, like I did it before, now you should be able to do it now. Not taking into consideration all the things that have shifted and changed from back then till now, and these kinds of things. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And this is where the disconnect is there's a lack of perspective from, and a lot of times it can be from both sides, because we can talk about it philosophically in a sense here. We can pull it apart and dissect it, and it can make sense. But when you're in those situations yourself, when you're sitting there and you're being attacked by your parents, or whoever it is that's giving you a bit of stick for the situation that you're in, regardless of whether it's you went through college and there's no job for you, or whether you were working really hard like you were told to do, you were out there and getting the job done, and then you got hurt on the job and now you can't produce anymore, and they're like, well, you should have worked harder while you were working and then you'd be more secure. And yeah, okay, it doesn't, I was already working really hard, bro, like relax. Or whether it's you're working really hard and you're doing the right thing, and then you contract a disease, you get like cancer or something like that. They're like, oh well, you should have been working harder instead of spending all your money on having fun, right? These things are very easy scapegoats for us to sort of like walk away from the situation and go like, oh, well, it's the person that was doing the thing. It's their fault. They should have done things differently and better. But what it comes down to is that the way that the system is stacked is there is no winning. There is no way of coming out of this on top. And that's how it's built, right? This is what we need to recognize, is this is how it is designed. We may think that it's different, but this is how it's designed. So there is a particular amount of people that are sort of like on the other side of that fence, if you will, and they're reaping the rewards. And there's people on our side of the fence, if you will, because trust me, the majority is on the wrong side of the fence here, that are sitting there chasing these hopes and dreams, being told lies and bullshit, and chasing these things down, and finding out that when we get there, when we do all the things that we're told to do that equals success, it's not there. and we're left out in the dark with injuries, with mental illnesses, with inability to sort of like look after ourselves, and we get told that it's our fault for not trying hard enough.
Well, I think one of the things you just said there about like chasing dreams, right? I think part of the problem is it's like we're not chasing our own dream, right? Like
Mm.
that may have very much been their dream, but part of it is like we aren't like told to really figure out what it is that like we actually do want, right? Like we're basically told we should want the same things that like our parents wanted, and it's like whenever you go down that path, even if you can like justify it by thinking you're gonna get like the same reward at the end of the tunnel, like even the people that do really well and get there aren't necessarily always happy either.
Hmm. Exactly. And that's part of the the lie as well, isn't it? The fact that we sort of like get told what we should do to be happy. And once we do those things, and even the people sort of like they cross the marks, they get. I think one of the greatest quotes was that from Jim Carrey, where he says, "I wish that everybody could be famous and rich, so then they'd realize that it's not the answer," kind of thing. And a lot of people say, "Well, that's easier to say when you're rich and you've got millions of dollars, yeah, and you're famous and that kind of thing." But for someone who's been there to say that, to go like, well, yeah, look, I had the money, I had this, or still do, right? But I'm still miserable and I'm still feeling like crap. And look at Robin Williams, right? Robin Williams was one of these people that just, well, you can say that he had it from a young age, right? Mork and Mindy and back before then, right? This is like the ages when he was coming through. He was coming through as a comedian, that kind of thing, and he had like the world laid out in front of him. He made a lot of money. He was doing a lot of stand up. He was doing a lot of films. He was doing all this stuff, right? And then the way that his life ended was tragic. But it just goes to show that you can have all of these things, right? All the success in the world defined by societal structures, by cultures, by the whole world basically looked at this person as being someone who is successful. They're set, they're done, that's it. They can do whatever they want to. But even that wasn't enough to overcome the psychological barriers, the mental barriers, the emotional barriers, and everything that makes you an individual, a human being. It wasn't enough to overcome that. And this is like, for me, it is the signal that says, okay, well, we're chasing the wrong things. We're chasing money and Lambos and uh, you know, coke and hookers and all those kinds of things. Like, oh yeah, you can think that it makes you happy, but when you get there, when you've done it, when you've had your fill, what's left? Because if there's nothing of substance, you're done.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about when LP was on. Like a lot of people just default to pursuing hedonism, right? And I think the problem with that, and this is what we talked about a little bit last time, was that whenever you're constantly like seeking, like extreme forms of pleasure as like your escape, or like whatever you want to call it, the problem is like it's it's very much not sustainable, you know, and it seems to like always escalate, right? Eventually, you get to this place where like your pursuit of pleasure starts causing pain, and like it can get very destructive. But like you're always doing these things in the pursuit of pleasure. But like at some point, once you've kept pursuing pleasure, like even if it's like let's say you're like freaking Dan Blazarian or whatever, right? Like you've got so damn much money, you can just do whatever you want all the time, all the hookers, all the blow, uh, whatever. Hashtag I don't really know if that's how Dan Blazarian lives his life, so just throwing that out there as a disclaimer. But you know, basically like even if you can get all of these things right and you can keep going down this path indefinitely, like what happens is like eventually you just get so fucking numb to it, like it just doesn't matter anymore, right? You're like, so what? Like I wake up every day and like there's hookers and blow every day, I'm driving my Lambo, and it's like at some point, like you hit that like faceplant moment. You're just like, why? Like, why am I doing all this stuff and I just still feel completely fucking empty and alone all the time, right? It's like we have to build our own happiness, right? Like we have to build the thing that we want. We have to exist congruent with ourself. Like we have to be an autonomous individual, right? Like just pursuing things because they're supposed to make us happy or things like that is a very like empty pursuit. Like the best way I can put it is life is suffering, right? Like you're gonna suffer no matter what path you go down, but choosing to suffer for something that like actually like is meaningful to you and adds some kind of value to your life or to the world, like something that like makes you feel some sense of like accomplishment or something is very much needed by pretty much everyone to like find some kind of meaning in life. But yeah, I mean, when we get to that moment, when we can start to see that and when we can accept it for ourselves is something that we all can only really figure out and determine for ourselves. So yeah, it's like while we can try to like help and steer people in that direction, like you can't make somebody see that like going out and driving your Lambo and hookers and blow every day isn't making you happy, And I mean, then if we get into the whole like not being like authentic or honest, I mean, how many people like living this lifestyle, of like just extravagant excess are gonna just like come out and be like, yeah, it doesn't make me happy. I don't know why I'm doing it. Like it's part of the show, right? Like you can't do all of this to have more and be more than like whatever everybody else, and then admit that it feels meaningless to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And trying to sort of like frame this so then people can understand it can be difficult because the concept, even sort of like I said the Lambo and Coke and hookers and all that kind of thing. There's people in the chat that go like, oh, I'd love a Lambo and I'd love some Coke and hookers. He said Coke and hookers, kind of thing. But sort of like to try and normalize that and frame it in a way that's as a bit more understanding than just sort of like saying these material things. There was an individual that I was talking to in regards to this kind of stuff, and they just didn't get it. They're like, well, I don't understand. Like if you had like everything that you wanted, that's it. You'd be set. You wouldn't have to work. You wouldn't have to do anything, that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but at some point you get tired of doing nothing, and we have that. Office Space, I think, is the movie where they end up sort of like saying, if you had $1 million, what would you do? And obviously, back in those days, $1 million, you'd be set. These days, it might not go that far. Um, and it really comes down to what would you do if you were set up? Because in that situation, you can do anything that you want to. Trying to express that is a different story. So this mate of mine, he was like really into beer, right? He drinks his beers all the time. He loves his beers. I don't know why people like it when I say beer. So it's okay. Imagine this, because they had at that time a sort of competition going on. If you collect so many beer caps and they have the right code on them or some shit like that, you get free beer for a year or something like that. Beer year. And I said to him, okay, so imagine that was for life. Instead of being for like 1 year, you can have beer for life. A tap run directly to your house from the brewery, and you can have on tap beer in your place 24/7. Right? Oh, that'd be the best, mate. I'm like, yeah, I know. It'd be pretty awesome because you like your beer, right? I know you like your beer. So the thing is, like, think about what would happen here. What would you? I'd be drinking all the time. Yeah, we would drink. I mean, you had people around for parties, right? You have parties all the time. People would come around drinking beers and everything. But sort of like, after you do it for like, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of thing, you start getting a bit tired of the taste of beer. You're having like a lot of beer, right? And you're getting tired of the taste. Maybe you're having heavy hangovers, you're throwing up a lot, you're having an adverse effect to having so much beer. And then it's going to get to a point where when you first get the ability to do whatever you want to with beer, right? You're going to have this spike in your usage of the beer, and then you're going to kind of like level off at the top and hit a peak and go like, oh, this is feeling bad, I don't like doing it, and you're going to start pulling it all the way back to a point where you utilize the beer to a degree where it's okay to use, but you kind of like it's kind of like maybe lost its value, its edge, its shine. And this is the same kind of like analogy that I was using for trying to get people to understand the whole thing with like money and millions of dollars and that kind of thing. Like when you first get, oh my god, yeah, I'm going to buy a big house and I'm going to do this and I'm going to buy a Lambo and all that kind of stuff. But then after a while, you're going to be like, a Lambo is just going to be a car, right? It's not going to be it's a Lambo. It's going to be like, well, it's my Lambo and I own it and stuff. But like maintenance is a pain in the ass. I pay the cost of a Camry every time I need to do a service on the thing, right? So I'm spending a lot of money, even though I've got unlimited money, spending a lot of money on the service and that kind of thing. Say with a house, right? You buy a huge mansion, right? And you have people around, all that kind of stuff, and you're like, yeah, but it's pretty empty most of the times. I need to pay cleaners to come through. It just becomes something that, like, as much as you've tried it and you've used it and that kind of thing, you've gone like, well, I don't really. There's just too much. There's too much of this just for little old me being in this huge ass house. I can literally hear echoes when I speak. It's probably not really suited to your needs, right? And again, there's people that are going to love that kind of thing, and that's fine for them. But at some point, you're going to hit that sort of like that limit, and you're going to start dialing it back to something that's more reasonable. Again, going back to the beer analogy, right? Where you pull it back to go like, okay, well, this is how I would use it, right? Regardless of how much I've got thousands and thousands that I could use for whatever I wanted to, but this is the amount that I'm actually going to use. And I think this is what we're looking at here is being able to understand that and aim for that, as opposed to hitting the Lambos and the Coke and the hookers and that kind of thing. At some point, you're going to get tired. You're going to get tired of having all of this abundance, if you will. And instead of wasting it, you're going to utilize as much as what you need, and the rest is just going to be like, yeah, it's there, but I don't really use it. You feel me?
Yep. And I mean, we can look at like where, like, even like not just the societal norms and everything, but where this stuff comes from. Like pursuing things is like a means to like add value to our life. It's just it's an empty pursuit. Like we all have to, I guess, just figure it out on our own whenever we get there. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think we definitely all have to be aware of. Let's catch up with chat. Let's see what's going on. Apparently, everybody's talking about rats because of the the rat paradise experiment. Yeah,
Yeah.
Coke doesn't like that experiment. FYI, everybody.
Well, it's not that I don't like it. I just think it's been heavily manipulated. Essentially, what happened was they created the experiment on an acre, to start off with, and because they didn't have the results that they wanted, which is essentially cannibalism and just crazy shit happening. They're like, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to make it smaller and smaller and smaller, and we're also going to shift the thing. So we're going to manipulate the situation. So essentially, like, for the weak animals to be able to eat, they have to go through the sort of like the healthy animals playpen, if you will. And of course, we've got like the whole setup between like the alphas and that kind of thing. And basically they just designed it to give the outcome that they wanted. So I see it as being unscientific, the way that they've done it. Like, they have their results, it is what it is. But the means that they went to get it, they decided what they wanted to happen, and they figured out how to make it happen. And that's not science, bro. That's not science, bro.
Well, to be fair, I don't think a lot of what passes for science nowadays is actually science. So much around like of our science like revolves around basically like experimenting for an outcome. Like you're not going into an experiment completely, like, I guess, like detached from like some kind of expectation of what you want to come out of it, right? Like, okay, so it always cracks me up. But yeah, like whenever you can't be like objective in your research, or you can't like remain objective and trying to like draw conclusions from this stuff, like you gotta. I think a lot of that stems from where they're funded from, right? Because if you want like all of these millions of dollars to do this research, then obviously, it's kind of like having you're basically like tied to the people that are paying you to do it, right? Like you're gonna try to appease them, or like accomplish whatever their goals are, and it's just And I don't know, like to me, it's not science. And like, so I mean, I get it, like what you're saying. Like it very much feels like it's all kind of a sham. But I mean, I think like the way to beat that is to start having, like real scientists that aren't just like pursuing this shit for more and more money. But
Sorry, you clipped there, bro.
I was saying, like, I think, like, the way forward from that is to, like, one, obviously people had to do independent research. And, man, like, how do you get the level of funding needed for things like finding, like, cures for cancer and stuff like that independently? I think that's the problem. Because, like, even if you do, like, pharma has so much money to
Sorry, you
fight.
clipped in there, bro.
I don't know why I'm clipping.
Maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look, and this is what I mean. The whole thing with like science, we kind of like pedestal science. It's like it's the peak of mental capability of human society in the world today. Like, yeah, relax, bro, relax. Right? Simple, very simple principles of science. And the motto of science is, if you translate from Latin, is see for yourself. That's what it comes down to, right? So that means that even if we're both scientists, which we are, like I want to tell everybody in the audience here, we are all scientists, right? We're just not taught to think that we are. So we're all scientists, but like if I have some results and you have some results, right? You shouldn't take my results just on my word because I'm a famous scientist and that kind of thing. You should test it for yourself, and vice versa. Unfortunately, obviously, when we're talking about a number of different things that we are investigating on the planet, we can't investigate every single thing. So we do have to rely on other people to be doing particular experiments with particular tools and these kinds of things. But realistically, what we're told to do, what science tells us to do, is to see for ourselves, to search for ourselves, to have answers for ourselves, which means we need to run experiments ourselves. And that can be daunting for some people. But when we look at how science works, like the very simple, fundamental principles of science, it's really easy. It's not hard. And it's essentially how we've formed most of our thoughts and opinions to date. Right? And if we look at it in that sense, we can have a greater understanding of how science works and how we should be applying it. And like the most important part is when someone is bullshitting you, and like I said, like this experiment we're talking about here with the rats. Like if you understand how science works, you can look at it and go like, yeah, that's rubbish. Right? That's not real science. And scientists around the world will go like, how dare you? That's the work of like I don't care. That's look at the basic fundamental principles of science. It doesn't fit the way that it's supposed to work. Same as like we talk about evolution. It doesn't fall into the scientific realm of being scientifically supported because as basic as it is, when someone turns around and says, well, if we observe something for millions of years, we can't do that. The human lifespan is not long enough to do that. So it falls outside the capability of scientific measurement. We can sort of like take it as, and I'm not saying that evolution is not real. It's the best model that we have for right now. I'm not disputing that. But what I'm saying is when we look at it and compare it to how science works, we have to say that it is unscientific. But people don't like to say that. And this is what I mean. These are the sort of like bits and pieces we need to work through, the stigma and that kind of thing. We need to work through and go, okay, well, this is the limitations of science and this is how we need to apply it.
Yeah, agreed. And hopefully you can hear me now. But what I was getting at is, like even like let's say you can get like objective or like honest, scientific research going, right? Like especially whenever you get into like the medical industry, what happens is, you know, you're up against people that are very much opposed to the innovation, right? Because like it'll destroy their business model. Like we can look at, Brown's gas, right? Basically the whole, I mean, put on the tinfoil hat for a minute here, but like there's basically, a lot of belief out there that basically the oil tycoons, like, the oil industry had this dude killed because he figured out how to make vehicles run off of water. But like, you know, looking at things like whenever you talk about like curing cancer, right? Like, do you know like how much the pharmaceutical industry does not want that to happen? like like
It's too profitable.
well, right, and the thing is like they will like literally buy out companies that are like getting close to actually curing things. I mean, I think a lot of this is why CBD and cannabis have been illegal for so long. There's just like so much money opposed to actually fixing some of this shit that
Mhm.
it's almost like an insurmountable goal, right? Because like we've created these situations where we're so dependent on the pharmaceutical industry, right? Like we've given them so much power that they now literally have the power to just basically kill people, and legally by not allowing these changes because it'll hurt their bottom line.
Mhm. Definitely. And not only just in these industries, but this is the thing we need to understand, that there's so many industries out there that are these giants that have the ability to have their way, is probably the best way to put it. And having their way means that they just keep making money, and it is at the expense of us as human beings, our health, our future, and that kind of thing. I mean, like, recently I was talking about the impacts of sugar on the human body and that kind of thing, and this is why I'm doing the whole thing with stevia that we discussed earlier in the show, is a basis of like trying to step away from sugar and utilizing sugar and that kind of thing, because the way that it is being utilized, and just the excess of sugar being put into things, it is not good for our health. And when we start looking at companies that are trying to reduce sugar usage, trying to find healthier alternatives and that kind of thing, you see the exact same thing that you're talking about there. People getting shut down, people getting bought out, people like all these bits and pieces, even to a point where at one point in one of these documentaries, and again, if you go to my latest post and you have a read through, I've linked to a few documentaries and that kind of thing you can have a look at in regards to sugar impact on human health when it's in excess. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't have it at all, but with moderation, kind of thing. Unfortunately, it's in everything. But there was this program that was put forward by Michelle Obama, and it was about getting kids sort of like healthy and that kind of thing. And it started off being reducing our the sugar in our diets and shifting diets and that kind of thing. But you will find that very quickly after she came forward with this program, suddenly she was funded by Kellogg's and all these like industries that are just heavy for utilizing sugar in the products that they sell. And then it went from reducing the sugar and changing the diet to being fit by moving around more. And like you can just see the way that it's working. It's like there's a threat. What do we do? Let's throw some money at it. Let's make it disappear. Let's make it go away. And again, like I said, it's cut and paste from all of these industries that we've just talked about. And instead of being like tinfoil hat for any one of them individually, let's just tinfoil hat the whole thing and go like, why can they get away with this? Because all they're doing is creating their business models around fucking us over, around killing us, around making our lifespan shorter, making us suffer, making us continue suffering for something that technically they've made us so like susceptible to. And understand that like that's how they operate. Their business model works on us as cattle, and how we and how they make money is off our own existence and health. And once we understand that and we start making decisions for ourselves to gravitate away from these things, we can try and free ourselves from the chains that bind. But until we recognize that there's an issue in the first place, we're not going to do anything about it. But yeah, I think we need to look at the corporations in general and just how they view us as consumers.
Agreed. And I mean, so much of that ties into the government too, because if we can understand that this is how corporations work, then we can start to understand that like ultimately the corporations are the ones controlling government.
Hmm.
They it's not a far stretch to like really get to the point of like understanding that we're essentially wage slaves to these people, right? Like, and it's the companies that we work for in many cases, right? Like the whole thing is like their objective is to make profit. Like, I mean, I get it, that's capitalism, profiteering, right? But the thing is, like, you have to like really consider the implications whenever it comes to stuff like the right to live. I mean, like I think so much of working for this system is basically just wage slavery. But like if we can like really like grasp that concept that like all of these businesses are based around making money, and realizing that how they do that is by not paying you, you know, and basically like capitalizing on you as the product, then it can, you know, like really become clear at some point, like just how heavily the odds are stacked against you. And I think like the only way to really break that is to start working against the system, you know, and
Mhm.
start not just conforming to it, but basically like existing in spite of it. You know,
Yeah.
like learning how to do things a different way. Because as long as you're playing the game by their rules, like you're gonna lose. It's a no-win scenario, and you know, it's weird because like they're corporations, right? Like they're not human beings, so it's not like they have to survive. Like they're not an actual being. They are a made up fictitious entity. Like that's why they're called corporate fictions. Like basically it's people that want to take your livelihood and make it into their abundance. And the way they do that is through lots of shit that isn't in your best interest.
Yeah, and this is why it's important to understand that yeah, essentially they rely on us, right? Because if we're buying their products, we are funding them, and this is why like it's good to search for alternatives, look for different ways of doing things, means of separation from perpetuating the system, which can be difficult for some. I can understand that, but yeah, I think if we all just did what we could to detach ourselves from these kinds of systems, we would start seeing that kind of like shifting, that turning around. But right now, what we're doing is we're just playing straight into it. They tell us what to do, and we do it. It's just that simple. Any kind of resistance is seen, you know, going against the grain, that kind of thing. We have the self-correcting system, which we've been discussing. So it's kind of like all engineered to keep itself in check. It's a very low maintenance system. We're all taking care of ourselves. We're policing ourselves and that kind of thing. And of course, when we start talking about big oil, big pharma, big sugar, all these kinds of things, we're labeled as tinfoil hatters and that kind of thing. And that's just weird and all that kind of thing. So it keeps it very well in check. But the beginning of it is understanding that that problem is there and seeking alternatives, detaching from the systems, and not helping them continue to do what they're doing. Um, because like I said, at the end, it's to our own detriment. If we want to keep eating the sugars and that kind of thing, feel free to do it to your own detriment. If you want to keep utilizing the oil products and that kind of thing, it's just bad shit. Like it's just that period. It's bad shit. Stop using it. Same with the farmer. Same thing. If you don't need to, don't use it. If you can find healthy alternatives that work, do it. But I think what it comes down to is we don't want to be in a position of feeling discomfort. That's one of the major things. Is the human condition. Um, is essentially like we don't want to feel discomfort, and we go through the path of least resistance, and they make that path for us. They make it the path of least resistance. Doesn't mean that it is the path of least resistance. They just make it so because they have billions of dollars to do so, and you don't. So I think recognizing these patterns and um, finding means of alternative measures is the start of the change that we want to see.
Yeah, and it's funny, like we're all now talking about not working. Um, One of my favorite songs, I get Rondon to play it every now and then, but there's a line in it that says, "If you don't want to work, then that becomes your job." And I can tell you, if you've ever tried existing in this society without working, you know, like at least in the traditional sense, you'll get it because it's not as simple as just going without things, right? Like if it was that simple, then I think everybody could probably pull this off. But not having a job and you know, like existing within the confines of society is probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. Uh, well, one, obviously the bills keep coming. You know, like there's
Mm.
bills for everything. Obviously, the food costs money, the rent costs money, the insurances that the government basically enforces and makes mandatory costs money. So not having a job hurts. Now they've even gotten to the point where they will bill you for not having health insurance. You know, like I don't see how anybody can look at that as anything other than a tax on the poor. But it is what it is, right? People wanted the government to get involved with healthcare because they were going to make it so much better. And lo and behold, what happens? Healthcare is now more expensive. It's worse than ever, and we're now billing poor people for not being able to afford it. And like it's not even just like people that don't want to work. Like there are literally people with jobs out there that can't fucking afford healthcare. It's insanity, but this is the society we live in. This is hoorah capitalism. Let's all get rich. Like to me, it's got to be like the worst fucking Ponzi scheme ever, and not just because it's failed so hard, but because people refuse to fucking accept that it doesn't work. like other than like a select few people that can like really capitalize on greed and get ahead in this society, like it doesn't work. Like success is literally selling 90% of your life to fucking pay for shit that you don't really like want or need but like have to have. That's insane to me. Like how did we get to this point where this is the norm, like this is the life that we're supposed to live. But yeah, trying to do that without doing it is even harder. And it's weird because like I've never really felt like that draw to go be like a homesteader, like growing all of my own food and like all of this stuff. But like the more I go down this path, I realize that that's ultimately like the choice you probably have to make, because there's just really not that many alternatives unless you want to like hope that the government will give you enough money to live off of and you can find whatever means you need to justify it. But then, like that would also weigh on my mind because like I fully understand that by me taking that money, it means that all of these other people are slaving away for it. And it's just, to me, it's more and more insanity. Like we need sustainable businesses. We need to have some kind of like congruence of self and like some kind of like autonomy in this world. But so much of our society is built around disregarding all of that shit in the pursuit of greed and scarcity.
Yeah. Just checking this in the chat here. Just in regards to what you're saying there, don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. I kind of feel that this is where we're at now. We're so invested in what we've been doing for the past X amount of time. The whole cognitive dissonance and everything like that is all kicking in, and like to change now would mean admitting that we've been making a mistake for so long. And again, going back to the human condition and what we tend to do is we don't like to admit these kinds of things because that means we have to admit that we were wrong, that we made a mistake, that we weren't smart because we're not smart. Like a person can be smart, but people are dumb. That's just that period. Period. That's how it works. Um, so being able to let go of these mistakes we've made in the past is fundamental for what we want to do moving forward, which is change. We want to have a change. We want to shift from these systems you were talking about, where the medical system's gone up like this, and they've done that. Government gets involved, everything turns to shit. Recognizing that this is a situation, and not getting into these kinds of battles, these political battles that I see consistently. I see people, oh well, the left side's like this and the right side's like that, and blah 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 blah, and back and forth and that kind of thing. Like, dude, it's all fucked. The whole thing. Right? The whole thing. Throw the whole thing away. We need to start again. Right? The whole thing. And it doesn't mean we have to backtrack. It doesn't mean we have to go to socialism or communism or like something new, something completely new. But it means letting go of what we had before. It means letting go of government systems. It means letting go of politicians, letting go of all of these structures, right? All the rules and regulations that we've had before that allowed the presidents to get into their positions, to whether presidents, prime ministers, doesn't matter what the fuck it is, doesn't matter where you're at. Right? Let go of these systems because all they're doing is taking you for a ride. And recently I made another post in regards to some political decisions that have sort of come through in Australia, very similar to what you're saying there in the states in regards to medical systems, that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what they put forward. Essentially, they're screwing us. Like that's the only I'm saying that this is going to be different this time, and it's going to like no, it's just a different way of fucking us in the ass, right? No lube, straight in, job done. Doesn't matter if you want it or not. They're doing it, right? That's how it is. But for us to actually shift from that, we have to actually make changes, and that can be scary in itself for us humans because we don't tend to like to do that. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I think we've got a lot of growing up to do. But the first part of it is admitting that we have these problems in the first place and letting go of the things that don't serve us. These systems being one of them. Now, as far as like moving back to what you were saying there in regards to sustainability and that kind of thing, it really sort of comes down to the mindset of like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like being sustaining, or even like minimalism, right? Minimalism will be different for each individual. Like what you need to survive, like maybe I need a particular, some t-shirts and stuff, like because that's part of what I am. But maybe you don't like the t-shirts and that kind of thing. You want something different that you need to survive. These are things that you need to have. So I think when it comes to having the vision, I guess is probably the best way to put it, of like how you see yourself pulling back from society. My version of it and your version are going to be completely different. Right? That's just how it is. But the thing is we can lean on each other for it. So maybe the things that I'm doing are things that you need, and things that you're doing are things that I need, and we can work something out. We can work together and get through this. This is how we used to do it in the past before we handed over our freedoms to these bullshit corporations, to these bullshit government systems and that kind of thing. We used to work it out that way. There was a means of doing so. And now we have the assistance of cryptocurrencies, or these different bits and pieces. So we have the ability to shift from these things. It's just a matter of being able to get that across to the people of the world and being able to go, you know what? All the old systems are fucked. We're shifting our shit. We're going to do things completely different now. And this is how we're going to do it. This is the means that we have. We're going to utilize what we want. We're going to do what we want to do, minimalism to our degree of like whatever we choose to do so. And anything else we can make up in between by leaning on each other and not leaning on these bullshit systems that are clearly taking advantage of us.
Yep. And
Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
no, I mean, like I get it. I honestly I wish we could get to some kind of place where we can start to look at, like one of my favorite forms of government would be voluntary syndicalism, like anarcho syndicalism, whatever you want to call it. But basically, like voluntarily working together for the good of the community. And, like we don't really have like an official label or anything for like how we run PAL. But I think obviously one, it's very voluntary. Like the people that are involved in leading it are very much like voluntarily like picking and choosing things that we like to do, like to add value to the community. And like none of it really feels like forced, you know. I would love to see like some kind one of the biggest problems is like one, getting like the land and getting the ability to be actually like recognized as as like a sovereign, place, like even if you don't want to call it like a country or whatever, but like being able to be like recognized as like some kind of like sovereign community or collective is just like the odds are stacked like so heavily against you. Like look at Sealandia, right? Like they went out and basically just had to start seasteading, but they like they've already had to like face issues with pirates, things like that, because it's really hard to be like a small group of people and to stand against the world. But like if we could get like just imagine something like maybe like the size of one state in the U.S. or something like what like one of your like territories in Australia, and like actually like make that some kind of like voluntary as collective, right? Like some people would like volunteer and agree to defend the borders and things like that, right? Like some people would volunteer to handle like the electricity and things like that. So, obviously, like some people would grow the food, but like getting a group of like-minded people that want to work together to make the thing work without having to impose on everyone else or like question like what's the value and what you do compared to what I do. Like just escaping that entire mentality that we have to live in a comparative and competitive world and just collaborate together to create something that doesn't exist yet, right? A lot of people like to say that that sounds like socialism or communism, but I really don't think it does because, like, even in socialism and communism, you're still dealing with like money and all of these things. But man, like it seems like it would be so fucking complicated in this world, right? Because all the other countries are obviously worried about money. So like even whenever you wanted to do things like say bring in new equipment to like run the like the electrical facility or like buy computers or things like that, you still have to like use currency and interact with other countries that's their standard. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle is like first, if you want something like this to exist, you have to get to a place where you can at least visualize it and also, like believe that it's a possibility.
Yeah, look, and that's it. The human condition is the greatest part of this kind of thing, and this is again something we were talking about with LP when he was on, and this is what I'm saying. Like, no matter what we come up with, every single thing that we come up with, whether it's crypto, whether it's anything, it's all designed to pave the way for humanity to step forward and all that kind of thing. But the human condition steps in, and it's like, oh yeah, it's all about freedom and having the ability to do what we want to in abundance and like bettering humanity. To start off with, we lay a couple of bricks, and next thing you know, it's like, yeah, but I want to have more than someone else, and it turns very quickly back into exactly the same thing that we've done before, which is basically people trying to get one over on the other ones, not working together. How can I get more than someone else? So I think the human condition is the first thing that would need to be overcome, because no matter what we put into place, even if we dismantled every entire system of government that we had on the planet right now, the systems that we recreate, as much as we may do so with the intent of bettering humanity, with the human condition attached to it, we would just find a means of corrupting that system as well. So this is why I think it's very important for us to understand ourselves, how we operate, and that kind of thing, and the way that we're influenced by our current surroundings to continue to do so. Because once we can apply interventions in these areas and change humanity from being the scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, but just in general, not just as a business model, and like fuck business models, like that's not the future. Right? The future is humanity being congruent with the self, and it means leaving these kinds of things behind. So if we can find a means of intervention of these this method of thinking that we have right now, then when we apply any of these kinds of constructs in the future, instead of them turning back into the very same thing we're trying to escape from, they will actually turn into something else. They'll come to fruition in the way that we expect them to, the way that we want them to. So as much as what I understand that that we need to change the systems themselves, and we need to sort of like abandon the ones that we have in place right now, there's also an evolution and revolution of mankind that needs to happen in our methods of thinking and the way that we interact with one another. Because if we don't change that fundamentally, nothing else will change.
Yep. Well, we're drawing close to the end. Anybody got like a mini topic you want us to touch on or anything like that? Let's see. Yeah, I mean, so much of like even the reason why like I do started this show and everything is like accepting that like my personal perspective is that like our society, like the way we do things, to me like it's all flawed. Like I don't. Yeah. Well, hold on a second. I guess we gotta figure out if Discord's gonna reconnect or not. Uh, Yeah, it looks like Discord is actually. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Co?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So anybody that wasn't listening on Discord could have probably heard me, but yeah. So I mean, like I said, one of the reasons why I guess like I started doing this show and like writing all the stuff that I write about and everything is it's ultimately like looking at society, seeing so much stuff that I don't agree with, and then like kind of taking on a little bit, I guess, that philosophy of you got to be the change, right? Like you can't just like expect everybody to do something different. Like you got to show them something different, right? Like you got to like let them know that it's possible, because most people just don't, like actually embrace the fact that you can go out and be something completely different than what you've ever known, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the example that I like to use for this is, the whole PlayStation analogy, right? Now, right now we're at PS4. PS5's already been sort of like concepted and is on its way, but the PS6, right? We don't know what that's going to be like. There's no classification, specifications, or anything like that. It doesn't exist right now, right? Because we're still waiting for the PS5. So at some point, we're going to start working on the PS6. It doesn't exist, right? And it's going to be magical. It's going to have super heavy duty capabilities, incredible graphics, and fantastic, right? But if we started talking about the PS6, and people, you know what, that'll just never happen. You can never do it. We don't have the technology. You can't build it. It's impossible. If we had that mentality, we would never have the PS6. And that being said, if we went back through the scales, we'd also there'd be no PS4, there'd be no PS3, there'd be no PS2, there'd be no PS1. It just wouldn't have happened if we gave up that easy. So it comes down to us understanding that for us to change, to have this new method of interaction, this new method of thinking, etc., it's going to take us accepting the fact that we're talking about something that does not exist. And it's going to be a difficult thing to do, to create this new thing, right? It's going to take some time, effort, and we can come up with this thing, but it is capable, right? Like we're capable of doing so. It is possible. Because right now, when we're talking about these things, what I find a lot is we have this whole like, oh, that's never going to happen. We can't change. People are always going to be the same. Like this kind of mentality, that's what's holding us back. If you're not willing to even try and comprehend the fact that it could happen, right? It could happen. Then it's never going to happen. If we don't try and do anything about it, it's not going to happen. So we need to understand that if we want these changes to happen, we have to first consider the fact that it could happen, find a means of like what we can do to make that happen ourselves, and start shifting slowly. It's going to happen slowly. Make these changes in our lives ourselves, the way that we interact with ourselves, with one another, and make that closer to what we want to happen in the future. And hopefully, with enough of us doing it, it will change, and we will sort of like manifest that thing in the future, just like the PS6 will manifest when we need to, when we put our effort into doing so. It will happen, but we need to actually believe that it can happen and apply ourselves to make those changes for it to actually happen.
Man, Cope, I just remembered something.
What was that?
Okay, so Azaria had a near death experience this week.
Really?
Yeah, I think she needs to come tell us about it. But
Giddy up.
we only got a few minutes left, Azaria. Come tell us about your near death experience. Oh, she did die. Okay, so I guess she reincarnated. Okay, so Azaria, like I wrote about my near-death experiences before, right? Like I think you read that once, but we got to hear about your near-death experience.
Is he? He there?
I don't know. She's typing. Oh, she can't talk. Oh shit! You're not dying again, are you?
There you are.
Okay, there she is.
Oh, pushing to. Oh, you can hear me. Hi.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey.
I was trying push to talk. I don't know why that wasn't working. Hi, I almost died.
Yeah, I know about it. So basically, like what happened is this sandwich decided to like turn on you like mid meal, and like it started trying to kill you, right?
Yeah, the sandwich, it took a turn. It turned on me. I thought we were friends, but we weren't friends.
So
And then
so did you have like any of those like yeah, like those pivotal like that deep like recognition of like the meaning of life or anything while it was happening?
yeah, I had like 30 seconds of my life flash before my eyes.
30 seconds is a long time.
Yeah, it was well, 30 seconds of my life did. And it was the part where I made the mistake of inhaling my sandwich instead of swallowing it.
Yeah.
Didn't have any huge realizations other than I didn't feel calm. No. No, I got up, I threw the sandwich. I don't even know the cats were running around because I guess I popped up and threw my plate and the sandwich went flying in the air and all the cats were running. I ran into the other room and out and spun me around and it was a mess. Gave me the Heimlich maneuver and then now my rib is cracked.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, hey, I mean, that part sucks, but, at least we still have an Azaria, so, I mean, like, that's a bonus. But, yeah, no, I was just kind of, like, mainly wondering if you had, like, one of those, like, deep, like, NDE experiences where, like, all of a sudden, like, everything in life makes sense. Like, you no longer have, like, a fear of death or anything, and, like, basically, like, if you turn into, like, Zinsaria or something.
Yeah,
Did you
no.
bring anything back from the other side? Is what he's asking.
Yeah. I saw white light. um
A tunnel? Was it a tunnel?
what I'm always afraid my cats are gonna eat me anyway. Yeah, I'm not cool enough to have anything like that happen. It was just choking, um, cracked rib. That's pretty much it. Guess I could make something up and say something happened.
Nah, I mean, yeah, we were kind of just joking, but mainly, it's interesting how like those NDE moments though, like they can be like so intense. Obviously, this one wasn't quite like on that level, but I guess that's actually probably a good thing, because like yeah, those are situations where you're basically like I guess most people say like you die and come back and like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we're glad to hear you're okay. So we just wanted you to like come and I guess joke with us for a minute.
Thank you. Yeah, one of my biggest fears, or I should say, dying, is not being able to breathe and choking, asphyxiation. More so than like something like die, like a
Mm.
um so yeah, I have breathing fears. So I think the main thing that was just going through my mind was just that was my biggest fear, that I was going to die from not being able to breathe. Just focused on trying to not die.
Yeah.
Because,
Oh,
um,
sorry. You have to make the weird noises with us tonight, apparently.
oh, okay, good. Yeah, I'm ready. I have some special noises prepared.
just don't make the don't make the noises from the almost dying on the sandwich.
Oh yeah, should I make the choking noises? I could do that.
Well, okay, guys. We'll be here next week for the epic episode 69. But thank you all for joining us for episode 68 of Coffee and Philosophy.
Giddy up. Much love. Thanks for having us on, man.